In April, I decided to start at the bottom of my TBR pile. Despite those odds, it was a pretty good reading month. So let's get journaling. The first book I want to talk about actually opens with a line from a journal entry. We must, by law, keep a record of the innocents we kill. And as I see it, they're all innocents, even the guilty. Which is how we are introduced to Scythe Curry. A little more on her later. Scythe by Neil Shusterman is a young adult sci-fi dystopian novel. This dystopia is a little different in many ways. I think you could see it as a utopia because it's a world where all problems have been solved from the world, from poverty to hunger to healthcare, which means that people don't die a natural death anymore. So scythes are appointed to kill people, which they call gleaning in this book, in order to keep the population numbers in check, and this is the only way you can die in this world. Of course, it doesn't mean that life is perfect, whether you are a regular person who is kind of in fear of being gleaned, which could happen never or like any moment, or if you are a scythe and you have to take people's lives for a living. I thought about this a lot and I'm not sure which one is worse. And this was the first strong point for me in this book, which is that it's a really strong basis for the reluctant hero trope, which I usually hate, but in this case it made a lot of sense. At the start of the book, we are introduced to Citra and Rowan, who are selected as apprentice scythes, which means that for 1 year they will apprentice under a scythe, learning, and I quote, the art of taking a life. And then at the end, one of them will be chosen to become a proper scythe and assume their responsibilities. And their reaction to this is very logical and not the usual, oh no, why me? Citra says, with nothing to really aspire to, life had become about maintenance, eternal maintenance. Could she possibly find greater purpose in the gleaning of human life? Which is such a good point, because if everything is solved and there is nothing to work towards, there's no meaningful job anymore, everything has been invented or fixed. So perhaps gleaning is the only meaningful thing you can do, because it gives you power to do this one part where humans are still in charge of, and do this with dignity and kindness. And that's exactly Rowan's point when he said, yes, he hated the thought of being a scythe. It sickened him. But what sickened him more was the thought of just about anyone else he knew doing it. He didn't see himself as morally superior to anyone, but he did have a keener sense of empathy. Now, this is all said in the beginning of the book, and I won't talk about how things progress with the two apprentices plot-wise. I just think that this was one time where the reluctant hero trope was done really well. So I won't talk about the plot, but I do want to talk about the world building. I loved the concept or the premise of Scythe from the start, but I was really skeptical of how the world building would be fleshed out, and going in and within those first 50 pages of understanding how the world works, I had to come up with a long list of questions in my head, which I thought would break the world building at some point. But to my surprise, the world building was really solid, and all the cracks I predicted just weren't there. It's a very thought-through world, and sure, it has some very convenient things going for it, let's say. I was quite impressed, especially because the author managed to create a rather complex and nuanced world within a relatively short book. Another thing I really enjoyed was how the book explored questions of life, death, mortality in a way that just really showed you the consequences of immortality. It gave a lot of food for thought, but not in a preachy or overly serious philosophical way. It was very nicely woven into the story, and it really made me think about life and things we should be appreciating more about it. And I also want to say that the character building was nice. I like the characters. They had a lot of personality, both the main characters and the others. And there was some character development too. Was it perfect? No, because the plot convenience in the world building also happened kind of with the characters' actions later on, which kind of destroyed some of the stakes, but I still really loved it. And if you love the YA genre in general, you probably won't mind it either. I would highly recommend this book if you like YA, especially dystopia and fantasy like The Hunger Games. Maybe I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for epic fantasy and good fight scenes, in which case this might not be your thing. But for me, it was a 5-star read. I can't wait to read the next one in the series, and I just want to end with one more quote from Scythe, which is, "I think all young women are cursed with a streak of unrelenting foolishness, and all young men are cursed with a streak of absolute stupidity." Everything, Everything from Nicola Yoon opens with, "I've read many more books than you. It doesn't matter how many you've read. I've read more. Believe me, I've had the time." Talking about books within books is always a little bonus for me. It's nice. But in this case, it was a little disappointing. There's 8 books mentioned in one sentence spoiler reviews, which sort of fit with where the story is going, but also not really. So just a disclaimer in case you think this might be a bookish book based on the first line, like I did. It's not. But let's talk about the actual story. Madeline hasn't left her house in 17 years on account of having a chronic condition, which essentially means that she is allergic to the world. One day, Ollie and his family move in next door. Ollie is the Jess Mariano type, extroverted, edgy, and angsty boy, suddenly obsessed with introverted, bookish girl. And so from the minute they lock eyes, a teen love conquers all romance starts with many questionable decisions and cringy moments. I want to start with the positive, because I did enjoy the experience of reading this book. It was easy to read. I read it in one day, and it was just like watching those classic high school rom-com comfort movies, which was exactly what I needed for my lazy Sunday. I had expected it to be more like The Fault in Our Stars or All the Bright Places, considering the themes of illness and love conquers all, but it wasn't as devastating as those at all. It was a lot more light and cheesy actually, but I was okay with it. It was very entertaining and engaging, and the main character is biracial, so it was nice to see that representation. So I understand why a lot of people love this book, but I also understand why a lot of people don't. I did have a lot of frustrations with this book as well, in terms of the pacing, with the romance, the decisions that the characters made, the predictability of the plot, etc. But it's a cute story, and so I was kind of okay with it. I gave it 3 stars, enjoyable read. Won't read it again and wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you are looking for this specific type of book, but it was a good, comforting time. If I was feeling all cozy and comforted, that all changed when I read Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Deep in the mountains of Akishina, where Granny and Grandpa live, fragments of night linger even at midday. We are introduced to our main character, Natsuki, as she drives up the mountains with her mum, dad, and sister for a yearly family retreat. Natsuki doesn't quite think she belongs on Earth, and neither does her cousin Yu, who believes he is an alien, and during the summer they try to find the spaceship that could take him back home. After being separated for decades, the cousins meet again, and we find out how their lives have gone since, and whether they still connect in this way, the way they did when they were young. So a very cute and quirky premise, which is very, very misleading. I was not prepared for Earthlings. I had heard about the elements of horror and magical realism, and I had heard that it was really, really weird. And it's true, it's just off the wall and absurd, but I was expecting a bit more silly and chaotic, not disturbing and traumatic. I don't think I'm easily disturbed, but the amount of traumatic events and the way they are presented packed in this little book, in my opinion, is irresponsible. Content warnings, all of them. Moments of joy, none, to be honest. If you have read Convenience Store Woman and you think, I like this author, maybe I should read Earthlings, please reconsider. Just check the content warnings and know that of all those things listed, they are written about in a very, very graphic way. Now, I just want to highlight that I have no issues with reading about traumatic events because it's a way to raise awareness about some very important topics and issues in our society. So perhaps it just comes down to taste of the way things are written about. And for me, I didn't enjoy the way it was done in Earthlings. I'm currently reading a devastating novel called As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, which is set in Syria, and there are a lot of dramatic events, but it's a whole different experience than reading this. And I guess I prefer books that deal with these things in such a way that lead the reader to empathy and understanding rather than shock and disgust. So shame on everyone who just called it weird, because that is giving the wrong impression altogether. I would call it disturbing, upsetting, damaging. I would not recommend this book to you unless you were a very big fan of A Little Life and need another dose of that. But to anyone else, I would give this one a miss. The final book I want to talk about is A Burning by Megha Majumdar. You smell like smoke, my mother said to me. So I rubbed an oval of soap in my hair and poured a whole bucket of water on myself before a neighbor complained that I was wasting the morning supply. This is our main character, Jivan, who shortly after this is arrested for supporting terrorism. She was arrested because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time in combination with some unfortunate and misguided internet interactions. But she thinks she will be fine because she's innocent, and surely people will testify to that, and then she will be released soon enough. This premise to me was really interesting, perhaps slightly flawed, but I don't know enough about India and its political and judicial system to be conclusive about that. But I went in really intrigued by this premise, and then it was quite a journey reading this book with a bit of ups and downs. The first 100 pages, I found it really hard to get into it. The chapters are extremely short, some just 1 or 2 pages even, and always switching to a different POV, which to me felt very disruptive, and I would have preferred longer chapters to actually connect with these different characters and get used to their tone and perspective. And the pace just also felt infuriatingly slow. But then a little later there was a really moving passage that kind of drew me back in, and from then there was a very steady tone and feeling of injustice and frustration, and also being torn between this feeling of choosing to defend others or choosing yourself and your own safety and future, which is not always an easy choice, especially in the sort of system that we learn about in this book. A lot of things happen in this story that are really awful, but it didn't really come through to me, I think because of the structure and perhaps the writing. But it was a really interesting story, and I would recommend it if you like political fiction. I think the structure and writing style just were not my thing, but I think the story still makes it worth reading. It explores a lot of topics in a very nuanced way, including corruption, marginalized communities, trial by media, and it's just really fascinating to read about, and it definitely gives its readers a lot of food for thought. So these were the books I read last month. I hope you enjoyed the journal spreads. Please like and subscribe if you did. That really helps my little channel grow. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.